Welcome everybody to our November 10th DAAC meeting. Good to have everybody here on this nice chilly evening. If anybody has anything specific to go over, you can go ahead and message me in the chat, and we will bring that up at the end. If you've got any questions during the chat, please type those into the chat so we can address those with whoever's speaking at the time. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of the October 13th DAAC meeting. And you should have all received that in your agenda packet that Vicki sent out. Do I have any questions on those, or do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Holly? Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, all those in favor, please type into the chat yes or an aye. Okay, any opposed? All right, looks like the ayes have it. So motion passes to accept the minutes from the October 13th meeting. Thank you, Vicki, for typing those up. And if anybody's got any discussion items, again, go ahead and just type those into the chat. We'll bring those up towards the end of the meeting. And with that, we're going to go ahead and start with Dr. Braunschreiber.
Hi, Vicki, would you mind putting up my presentation, please? I will kind of narrate. All right, I can't see any of you now. Can you all see the presentation? Okay. All right, good evening. My name is Terry Braunschreiber, and I've been the principal of Palmer Ridge for all of 15 months now. As you can see, Palmer Ridge, we are the home of the Bears, but a lot of people don't know this, that we are going to be changing our mascot this year. Vicki, can you go to the next slide? There it is. There's our new tentative mascot until we're able to change our safety protocols. All right, next slide, please. A little bit of the history of Palmer Ridge, and I love our crest over there on the right, by the way. I just think that's brilliant, showing the mountains, showing the bear claw, and so forth. Even though I was in another district before I arrived here, I was always following Palmer Ridge because it opened at the same time, or just about the same time the last school I was in, Discovery Canyon, opened, and I was a founder of that school. I was on the planning committee. So we actually opened up down there in 07, while Palmer Ridge opened up in 08 with 9th and 10th grade. So we were in a lot of the early athletic leagues together with a bunch of new schools, including Valor Christian and Legend and Vista Ridge and Discovery Canyon. So I've always been kind of watching what Palmer Ridge is doing. So even though I wasn't in this district, I was well aware of all the success that Palmer Ridge was having. Gary Gable, or Gare Bear as he's affectionately called, is happily retired in 2019. I know this because he chortles quite a bit about how glad he is not to have this job during COVID. Anyway, we still reach out to him every once in a while, and he enjoys driving his rental cars, because that's what he's telling me he's doing. We currently have about 1,215 students. I think it was 1,217 today, actually, in grades 9 through 12. Next slide, please. This is the mission statement. I'll let you look at that. The big keywords, we have these printed in numerous places around the building. Igniting a passion for learning, engage, encourage, and expect excellence. This is the original mission statement and the original vision statement. You can go on. From 2008 with the planning committee who created that. And I'll let you read through that, but it's really focused a lot on professional learning communities and innovative instruction. Next, please. So based on what I had learned about Palmer Ridge and reading through the mission and vision and hearing about what the community wants for this school, last year our administrative team came up with 4 cornerstones of Palmer Ridge's work. Professional learning communities, innovative teaching and learning, social and emotional well-being, and community engagement. Next, please. And I'm not going to read all these slides to you, but I just want to show you how Palmer Ridge's 4 cornerstones really relate to District 38's strategic plan. You can see the 5 goals there on the left, which I believe you went through in the last DAAC meeting, and our cornerstones on the right. And I'm going to briefly talk about each one of those. Next slide, please. So you can see this one deals a lot with social and emotional well-being. We have a number of things that really relate to this. We have a new campus security structure. We have a crisis planning within the district. All of our teachers went through a Capturing Kids' Hearts training this year that is dedicated to really building relationships with kids. We have an active Sources of Strength team and a link crew, and I'm part of the SO Coalition, the Social Emotional Wellness Coalition, which really taps into the community resources surrounding mental health. Next slide. This one really talks to innovative teaching and learning. This year, we've established an instructional leadership team based on a number of really master teachers in our building, and they're sharing their instructional practices to different teachers around the building. We have a number of pathways, which I'll get into a little bit later, but a lot of different pathways for students to be successful after high school. And none of them really limit them to any one particular path. Any path they choose, they can always choose to go on to do something, whether it's in the workforce or the military or 2 or 4 year colleges afterward. Next, please. So professional learning communities, this is really our professional development. It's ongoing and it's job embedded professional development. It's not just a conference that you hear about on Friday and think about it on Saturday and forget it by Monday. We have regular meeting times with departments, and the PLCs are focused on these 4 questions. What do we want students to know? How do we know if they know it? What are the best instructional strategies to use? And how do we respond if they don't know it or if they already know it? Now, those may seem like really simple questions, but we spend a lot of time really narrowing down what are those essential learnings. You know, we look at these huge lists of state standards. What are those essential things that kids must know to be able to go on? And we really had to do that a lot during this hybrid model that we're on now, because we simply don't have enough time face-to-face to be able to hit everything we want to and get engaged into everything we want to. So we really want to narrow it down. Then we have to arrive at what are those assessments? How are we going to know for sure if this is an authentic assessment and if we are measuring what we want students to know? And how are we going to get them there? So there's a lot of backwards planning involved. And what do we do if they don't know it? Teachers are comparing data, they share strategies. Teachers in the same PLCs, for example, a biology class will say, this is an example, my kids did really well in this assessment. How about you? And they would compare their data. What did you do differently? And they would share those strategies in order to increase student achievement. Next one, please. This one really isn't one of the Palmer Ridge cornerstones, but really based on effective use of resources. But we did reduce our budget by 15% this year. Now, obviously, COVID had a lot to do with budgets, but we really kind of decide when we're spending money, what's the biggest bang for our buck? What is going to be the biggest impact on student achievement? That is really how we prioritize where our money is going to go. We're utilizing the CARES Act money whenever possible. We apply for eligible grants, and we're always weighing repairing resource or equipment versus replacements. Next. And finally, community engagement, we know is really important in a town like Monument. Last year at this time, we were actually preparing for a Veterans Day assembly where we had a lot of local veterans come and we honored them. We had our band and our choir sing. We had a choir that's composed of veterans, an a cappella group, come out and sing. And our kids at the end of that ceremony were able to come down and actually meet veterans face to face, which was something that a lot of them, if they weren't military families, haven't had the chance to come and say thank you to veterans. This year we were unable to do that, but our Ridgeline, our television studio created a video that we're going to post tomorrow. So we're still honoring our veterans when we can, even if it's not in person. But we do have a lot of other community engagements. We have a lot of Eagle Scouts that work with the community. In fact, one of ours just created a war memorial for the Monument Cemetery, and that was presented a few Saturdays ago. We just got done with a Harvest of Love drive, donating to Tri-Lakes Cares. Every year we find a Make-A-Wish child, and we raise money in order to help that child go to or on a vacation of their choice. And we have a number of our programs that go and do things in the community. We also are giving family and student surveys frequently. We communicate through our social media, through push emails, through our websites, so a variety of ways of communication. Next one, please. These are the pathways we talked about. We're going to have a night. Hopefully it'll be an in-person night for students in the spring, where we talk about all the different pathways that students, before they start signing up for classes, they get a chance to see all the different pathways that we have. Obviously, the college prep classes are the typical classes that we offer all students. We have an honors program, AP classes. As you know now, our online classes have expanded quite a bit. We actually have 3 platforms of online classes right now. We give credit for work study and internships. We have concurrent enrollment opportunities. That is where a Pikes Peak Community College professor will teach our kids. We have dual enrollment, where courses are taught by our teachers and they get college credit as well. And we also have a Career Start program, which is basically vocational skills taught at Pikes Peak Community College. And those kids spend 3/4 of the day at Pikes Peak learning different vocational skills, and they usually come back for an afternoon class. Next, please. A whole lot of CTE programs, career and technical education programs. That's something that we're really excited about at Palm Ridge. Project Lead the Way. We have an engineering program. We just added aerospace back to that strand of engineering. It's been gone for a while. Our DAAC is based on marketing and business. Ridgeline is our studio production class. We offer cybersecurity for the first time this year, and that's already become very popular. We have a cyber class 1 and 2 course. And our journalism, our teacher there is going to be certified in CTE. And why that's important is that qualifies us for a lot of Perkins grants and things like that, so we can actually fund a lot of these things. Next. Our academics, we were always looking for inquiry-based and hands-on components in all of our academics. Here you can see a few pictures of an egg drop project in physics. There's some trench warfare letters written in U.S. history. And here's in the bottom, there's students in an advanced qualitative reasoning class, and they are calculating probability in games of chance. So they actually have a carnival, and although it's a lot of fun, they also have to go and calculate all the probabilities of people winning and so forth. So we always try to get that relevant and hands-on experience in all of our academics. Next, please. Our arts are extremely successful, our visual and performing arts. Even when we had complete distance learning last spring, the drama department decided to produce a radio show since they weren't able to do a spring musical. And we have already had virtual concerts this year. Next, please. Athletics, although the schedules are very crazy this year, we actually have more athletic seasons. They're all shorter, but even though they've been reduced, we've had a strong shortened seasons already. Our boys cross country finished 7th in the state, girls finished 6th. Our football team, before they were quarantined, were 4-0, getting ready to compete for the league championship. We don't know if we will be invited to the playoffs or not. We do qualify for them because the 2 games we missed are not considered forfeits. They are considered non-contest or no contest. So we still may have a shot at continuing our football season. And we did have several state qualifiers for tennis. Next, please. We have a long list of clubs and activities. Even now, our teachers are meeting with kids, separating cohorts in order to ensure that students are finding their tribe, finding what they're interested in, but we're still keeping them as safe as possible. Next, please. Our school spirit is really, it's not that, I shouldn't say it's great. It's not bad considering what we're doing now. We've had a lot of spirit days and so forth. The kids will dress up. These pictures you see are from homecoming from last year, but we actually try to do as much as we could for homecoming this year. We didn't have a dance, of course, but we had spirit days. We had Ironman volleyball, which is a boys volleyball contest outside. We had a homecoming kickball game instead of a powder puff football between the girls. We had kickball. We had a senior sunrise, and all of them were spread out and masked up. So we're still trying to do as much as we can, because we were all heartbroken that especially our seniors aren't able to enjoy their senior year like they normally would. But we are still really working on trying to give them some opportunities. We just finished a trunk or treat on Halloween. That was very successful, and it raised a lot of money and cans for the Harvest of Love. Next, please. Staff spirit is good too. These are all from this year, as you can tell by the masks. That was on Halloween. And what's fun is we got to dress up for 2 different days for Halloween this year because we had 2 different cohorts. So that was kind of nice, and not everybody wore the same costume each time. Next, please. These are some of the accomplishments that we list on our website and our profile. You've probably seen that LP and Palmer Ridge are typically ranked as some of the best high schools in Colorado. Last year was no exception. We had 3 National Merit Scholarship recipients. We offer 20 AP courses. I think this next stat is very good. Almost 77% of our kids scored a 3 or better on their AP exams. Very high graduation rates. We had 5 military appointments. As I said before, we are a Project Lead the Way school. A few years ago, we had a bachelor recipients and over $7 million in scholarships offered to our last graduates. Next, please. So some of the challenges and opportunities we're looking at now, we're continuing to navigate the hybrid learning model that we have now. We're always constantly reevaluating what we can do better, and we're getting feedback from parents and from students. We are looking to expand our career and technical education. I spoke about some of that before, but we're getting more people certified in there, and we're looking to offer some more additional CTE classes. A challenge is always attracting and retaining quality staff members. I'm not sure what this pandemic is going to do to future teachers. I'm hoping it doesn't discourage any of them. What I'm really hoping it does is start to attract some of those kids that are used to some of this online learning and have some great skills in teaching, some of those great strategies, and bring those to our building. Always a struggle to build relationships and engage with kids when you see them once each week. You know, we're always trying to reach out. It's very important. We're always emphasizing to build a relationship, do things with the kids where you're having a lot of discussions and so forth when they're in front of you. But when they're at home, that's when, if you don't need to be there to facilitate, obviously leave those things for the online learning at home or the distance learning. And we are always trying to balance offering a wide variety of courses with limited staffing. The more electives that we offer, the smaller those classes are because we spread kids out, and then we can't always offer everything we want to do. So we want to be strategic with using our FTE in order to offer kids as many of the courses that we possibly can. Next, please. We had a junior, Lex Palmer, and she created a little highlight video about Palmer Ridge. And Vicki, I believe, has to get out of this and log in to show that. This is just a little over a minute.
Does it look like you're all going to be able to see this?
I can.
Okay.
Palmer Ridge High School sits on the crest of a hill overlooking Monument and Mount Herman. Blessed with beautiful views, weather, and accessible outdoor spaces, students never lack fresh air. provides a quiet respite for students to focus on their work or browse for a book.
Oh, we lost the sound.
Classes, one can distinctly view the strong social community that is built up at PR, as friends catch up with each other and discuss their next class. Lunchtime at PR means top quality choices, clean eating environments, and the ever-kind cafeteria staff. In the gym, one can participate in PE classes, while in Mr. Oda's classroom, one might be able to observe fascinating biology, chemistry, or physics experiments. There's never a boring moment in science class. Curriculars are just as important and popular at PR. Clubs such as Speech and Debate or Friends of Rachel can be seen spreading thoughts and positivity around the building.
So that video is a bit bittersweet for me because I love what she did. I think it's really well done. But just seeing so few kids there with them all wearing masks, you know, I'm hoping to reshoot this when we go back to normal and see hallways full of kids and all of them doing a lot of activities and not being as separated as they need to be. So that is all of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions I could answer? And I don't know if you want to put those in the chat or ask live.
Thank you, Dr. Bramsharber. I'm not seeing any questions coming into the chat. Oh, here we go. From Holly, what do you think is the distinctive, what do you think is the distinctive of PRHS that sets it apart?
Sets it apart from the school down south or sets it apart from all schools? You know, I'm not sure if it sets it apart. We do a lot of things with Lewis Palmer. I know that they plan curriculum together. We do a lot of things, and that's intentional, that we're not pitting one school against each other. I think our CTE really is something that to be proud of, and we're really working on increasing that. I can't speak to all the courses and so forth that that Lewis Palmer does. I do know that they have a biomed program with Project Lead the Way. That is something that we're looking into because a lot of kids and staff have expressed interest to it. And since we actually have Project Lead the Way in 2 different areas, the third one would actually be free of charge for us to adopt. So if we can get the TE, the teacher equivalent, to teach those, we would love to do that. But we have extremely hardworking teachers, extremely hardworking kids, very nice kids. Boy, not sure if that sets us apart, but it sure is something to be proud of.
Okay. You've got some great comments in there thanking you for your presentation and the awesome leadership, dedication, and passion for education at PRHS. You've been a nice segue from Dr. Gabe or from Mr. Gable, so it's been really nice and kind of took hold, especially in this lovely year that we've had. So it's a lot to take under wing. So I think everybody's happy with the relative smoothness that basically the whole district has done, because it's been just an armful for everybody to take care of. So I think the kids are happy to be at least participating in, you know, at least some in face with the teachers. I know that my daughter as a senior is her biggest thing was, I want to be with my teachers. I don't want to, you know, do everything online. So the fact that we were able to do that without having to go to complete online was really happy for her. So we're doing everything we possibly can, and I know she's happy about that. So
good.
So okay, doesn't
Okay,
look
thank
like we've
you.
got anything else. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go moving right along. Tiffany, are you ready to queue up for your Board of Education update and legislative review? Thank you,
I think I
Tiffany.
just have one possible slide that Vicky's going to throw up there, which is our strategic goals. So what you're looking at, if you all remember last week, I went over what our D38 strategic plans and our key goals are, priorities that we've been working on as a board. We had Teresa Phillips and Ron Schwartz gave us an update on our first goal, which is cultivate safe, healthy, and welcoming school environments. We've heard from Teresa and I did an update on our number 5 goal, which is forging strong community relationships and fostering effective communication. And we've also discussed goal number 2. Chris Taylor and I kicked that one off in ensuring high quality instruction and relevant educational experience for all students, of which Dr. Benton and Dr. Summers led a good portion of that discussion with their expertise in our programming. And all of these, if you'll notice that when you see us going through these, you'll, again, like I said last week, all of our agenda items will have one of these 5 goals, if not one or more, on each of our agenda items to ensure that we're staying aligned with our goals. And we still have, we're still looking at getting through these and talking about them before the end of the year, but keeping in mind that these are always going to be ever pushing forward, always. This isn't just a one-time discussion. These are goals that we want to make sure that we continue to use as our guideposts into the future. And they will update as obviously throughout the years as goals change and boards change and our district changes. But the idea is to leave something and a legacy for future boards and future leaders in our district to continue to move forward with that long-term strategic plan. So I encourage all of you to jump on board docs for the slides and documents. There's a lot of information and really valuable information that we've been just really pouring a lot of energy and care and effort into making sure that we're doing this the right way. And I could go on into each of these goals and presentations, but that would in and of itself be a long presentation. So I encourage you to look at our board docs. Despite the impact of COVID is having on our district across the United States, we are continuing to move onward and upward, and we're not going to rest on our laurels. Our October enrollment count came in, and it was slightly higher than anticipated with 6,481 students. Our per pupil revenue is at $7,762. And our revenue is derived from our local residential property taxes and our usage fees. And then, as many of you know, the state then backfills the rest. And we took a conservative approach to our budget this year. So after the October count, we had an opportunity to utilize funds and give our staff a much needed bonus for their November paycheck. We voted on that at our last board meeting. And although it certainly doesn't make up for the freeze we had to endure due to the budget shortfalls that all school districts across the state are facing, we wanted to do what we can to show our staff how much we appreciate how much they're enduring. And they really are at the forefront of making sure that all of our kids are learning in a safe environment and really just doing the best they can. And we're so proud of our district. I personally am proud of our district, and I pretty sure I speak for the rest of our board that we're proud of the work we're doing. We also are looking to issue requests for proposals for an owner's rep on how to best address our Grace Best usage. We voted to put our portables that are at Big Red up for auction, and those portables are not up to acceptable code for an educational purpose. So that's one of the reasons we put that up for auction. We're definitely seeing a spike in the numbers of positive cases this past week, not just in D38, but across the region and across the state. So please jump on the D38 website where you'll find a transparent dashboard that is updated weekly on our positives and our quarantine status of each building. And we're still staying the course with our original plan and working with the health department to keep our schools open and our students and our staff safe. What else have all of our superintendents in the Region 6, which is all of El Paso County, all of Pueblo County, Teller County, and beyond, composed a letter to our governor and our health department, or not our health department, our Colorado State Department of Education, requesting for a pause in our standardized tests, and the cited concerns were included that schools can't provide fair and uniform testing conditions across in-person, hybrid, and online learning populations. And the letter also states that the timing of the CMAS assessment and the lag of available results means that CMAS results would not add value to the efforts to compensate for COVID-related learning disruptions. So what we're looking at is you're looking at a high stakes test with low value. And also the letter says that the time preparing and administering the CMAS would be better invested by teachers for support and direct student instruction. The social distancing requirements alone would make it logistically difficult or impossible to assess whole classes of students at the same time and in the same place. And the energy and effort that goes into those tests and preparing takes away from the instruction time that's needed for our kids during this time. So, so far there's been no response on that, but it was a move that our superintendents have done. We haven't seen any communication from any other superintendents in the state thus far on that one. And then finally, I think the question of the day is, what about the ballot? Amendment B, which is the Gallagher Amendment, was repealed and that passed. If it had not passed, our tax rate would have gone from 7.1 to down to about 5.8, 5.9. So the passage means that the ratio established under the Gallagher Amendment will no longer trigger the automatic decrease in local property taxes and assessment rates, which will prevent the estimated reduction in local shares at about 490 million statewide. So the drop in local share would have required that the state to backfill at a time when they're about 1.1, I think it is what it was, $1.1 billion shortfall in state funding for public education. So the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment isn't just good for schools, it's also good for local governments as well that are also struggling. Another passage was Proposition EE. And Proposition EE is the one for the tobacco and nicotine tax. It's expected to generate about $175.6 million in cigarette, tobacco, and nicotine tax revenue in the budget year 21-22, which is the first full year that the measure will take effect. And then it'll go up to they estimate about 276 million beginning of the budget year to 2027 to 2028. So it ratchets, it phases it in when as the new tax rate phases it in. And what that money will go towards is one of the big things the governor was pushing for is that Proposition EE would provide funding for expanded preschool, including at least 10 hours per week for free preschool for children that are in their final year of preschool before kindergarten. It also is funding, it will fund rural schools. Any additional funding that's left from it would help also K-12 education programs, housing development, eviction legal assistance, healthcare programs, and then there's general state spending and tobacco education funding. Now, keep in mind, though, that when we always get asked, well, what about the marijuana money when that passed? And as we found out after the fact is that marijuana money is great for BEST grants, but it's when people say, how come it's not used for teachers? Well, that's because it's not what it was designed for. So personally, I'll be curious to see how this all fluffs out with the legislature and how that money gets divvied up. It is specific, but we'll see how that lands and how that falls. The other ballot measure that passed was 116, and that reduced our state income tax from oh gosh, what was it? It was 4.63 to 4.55%. tax, and as we know, Colorado's a state, Tabor state, which we're the only ones where we have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which also, by the way, I'm going to go back a little bit to the Gallagher Amendment that passed. That cannot ratchet back up without voter approval. The legislature does have the ability to ratchet it down, but it cannot go back up because of Tabor. So that is protected through Tabor. But with the new tax rate, basically, if you have about some household that's taxable income of about 125,000, currently at 4.63, you'd see about 5,788 taxes owed. And so this would take it down to about 5,688 for a savings of about $100. $250,000 home would be, or income would be about $200 savings. So K-12 education funding this year was cut by $572.4 million. So we'll see the average Coloradan, what that looks like with the average district in the state. So we'll see what the impact is with that. Any questions?
I apologize. Tiffany, could you go back, way back to the very beginning? What was the total number of students that we had on the October count and the per pupil amount?
So our per pupil funding revenue is $7,762 per pupil funding. Our October enrollment count was 6,481 students.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, anybody else have any questions for Tiffany? Does the total count include MA?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. Good question, Kathy. Okay. Not seeing any other questions.
And also on our dashboard, if you can go to our board docs, we have a dashboard that we have every month with our board meetings that shows per building where our student count is, what classroom, what grade level, what building. So there's a transparency piece there that shows exactly what students are where. Keep in mind also that there's a difference between a student that's a full-time equivalent and a student who's a body. So for example, a preschooler is counted at 0.5 FTE, which stands for full-time equivalent. So a preschooler is counted as a half of a student. So a first grader would be counted as a one student. So when you're looking at those, keep that in mind as well.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Great.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Thanks.
you.
Great. Okay, we'll move on to the CDEC update. Rick, you're here. I saw you up there somewhere. Are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
All right, awesome.
How are you doing?
Pretty good. You might want to speak up just a little bit. You're kind of quiet.
Okay, my microphone's not very loud.
Okay, there we go. That's better. Thank you.
Better? Good.
Yep.
Good. Is Vicky on? Do you have the PowerPoint, or would you like me to share that? Oh, there you go. Look at that. Well, I'm here with Michelle Ney, and Michelle Ney is our parent family liaison for special education, and she actually is the organizer for CDEC. So I'm going to let her start the conversation, and then I'm going to jump in towards the latter half. So Michelle, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about who CDEC is and what we're doing and what that looks like this year?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So again, my name is Michelle Ney, and I am the parent and family liaison for Lewis Palmer School District. And the Special Education Advisory Committee, affectionately known as CDEAC, is something that we host several times during the year. We tend to mirror the DAAC schedule. And this year, we just had our first meeting last week as we navigate what things look like in COVID. But to back up just for a minute, so CDEAC is mandated on the state level, but it is not mandated on the local level. But our school district does have an active CDEAC and a long history of that. So when you think about the Special Education Advisory Committee in our district, what we are is we're the confluence of all things special education at the federal, state, and local level, and really at the personal level with the people who attend and participate in our group. And so we like to have families represented, we like to have staff represented, and also community members. And so if you really think about it as a giant Venn diagram of all the stakeholders, as well as the federal and state and local intersections of special education, that's kind of what we are. And we talk about special education in general, so it's not a place for families to come and talk about specific concerns that they have with their student. We really try to keep a broader approach, and then specific concerns or discussion points, we like to have separate and private meetings for those. And really we are navigating new waters as we are in everything these days. And like I said, last week we held our first CDEAC meeting of the year, and we did hold it virtually. And I will say that it informed some things that we may change in the future in terms of CDEAC. For years, we've talked about how do we broaden our base? How do we get more people involved? We've had a very loyal core group through the years, but we're always looking to expand that. And one thing that we found by hosting our virtual CDEAC last week was that we had more people than ever RSVP and attend. And so we had 30 people RSVP, and most of them showed up. And at the end, it was quite poignant. One of the parents really shared in an emotional way that this was the first CDEAC that she had been able to attend because she was able to attend without leaving her house. And so that's something that Rick Frampton and I have talked about moving forward post-COVID, that we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our stakeholders, and that we look at continuing to host at least some of our meetings in this format. So do you want to go on to the next slide? Thank you. So one of the points in the previous slide that you saw is that we host the Aliorum Day Awards, and that is something that will this year be in its 4th year. And we like to honor people who are making a difference in the lives of people with disabilities, with our students with disabilities. And we have 3 categories that we recognize: staff, students, and community members. And we solicit nominations from our community, and we select those, and then we are able to pick our nominees, our winners. Everyone's a winner, obviously, if you're nominated here, but the people that we want to specifically acknowledge in each of those categories. Now, our Aliorum Day Award ceremony, as you might imagine, was canceled in the spring of 2020 due to COVID. We still acknowledged everyone, and so they were still celebrated, but we weren't able to do that in person. And we are hopeful that we will be able to do that in the spring of 2021 and make up for lost time with our 4th annual ceremony. All right, and then I think with this next slide, I hand things back over to you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. One thing we talk about every year in DAAC is what does our special education count? So We were working diligently this morning to pull up numbers, and these numbers are about as fresh as they can be. This count is as accurate as of this morning. We have 663 students who have been identified as a child with disabilities, which means they have an IEP. You can see the breakdown by school, and you'll notice that this is a decrease of 30 students from the previous year. One of the things that we're seeing a trend in is our littlest students, our preschoolers. We're not seeing the enrollment in the numbers at that level as we have traditionally seen and what we've even planned for. And I think we're seeing families of our real little kids reluctant to jump into the school setting this fall because of the COVID pandemic, and they're waiting to see what's going to happen with schools. So we actually haven't seen the same level of decrease as we're seeing in the general population. And one of the reasons we think our numbers are staying fairly steady across the K-12 environment is students with disabilities have fewer options, and there's fewer places for alternative education for them to go. We know that the students with disabilities don't do as well as their non-disabled peers in general in a remote or online learning environment. So we're seeing fewer kids move to alternatives to Lewis Palmer kids with disabilities. So those are some of the things I want to highlight. Our high schools, both of our high schools, our numbers have actually increased from last year. We saw a little bit of a dip in the middle school, and the elementary schools, with the exception of Bear Creek, have been relatively stable. So it's really that preschool is where we're seeing the primary dip. Vic, you want to move to the next one? There we go. Obviously, we, like everybody else, have been impacted by COVID. And quite honestly, I think we can say with some confidence that students with disabilities have been impacted as much or more than the general population for a few reasons. We have a population of kids with disabilities who come to us every single day with some real medical issues, and contending with the idea of possibly contracting COVID and getting sick for them could be a life and death decision. So we're watching some of our most medically fragile families really struggle with the decision on whether they need to be in school, the benefits of going to school versus the health risks and the possible exposures. And our families have had to really struggle with making those decisions. I know that's true for many families, but we have a population of kids that this is especially true for. Something we noticed in the spring, and we're continuing to notice now, is that remote learning is not, well, I'd say it's not ideal for anybody, but when you have a learning disability or a disability that impacts your ability to access education, remote learning can be very, very difficult. And we're seeing that for many of our students, when we have to go to remote learning, whether it be in the hybrid in secondary, or if we have to move to remote learning because of a quarantine or some other factor that prohibits kids from coming to school, that this is less than ideal. And one of the things that we're going to continue to talk about in Lewis Palmer is how we can maximize our in-person learning for those kids who struggle in the remote learning environment. One of the things that we've initiated recently is we're in the secondary levels, all three of our secondary schools, the middle school and both high schools, is we've put in place some Flex Fridays where our students who are struggling in the remote learning environment actually have the opportunity to come into the school and do some in-person interventions and receive in-person tutoring and support that way. So we found that will be very helpful for our students who are struggling with accessing the education on the computer. And if there, for any reason, we make a move into remote learning, we're going to continue to work hard to figure out how we can create opportunities for students to benefit from in-person learning, even if it's on an abbreviated schedule. So we're working very hard to plan and prepare for that if in fact it does occur at any point in the future. We learned a lot in March, April, and May, and we learned where it didn't work so well, and we learned how to get really good at it too. So I do believe our learning is going to put us in a place where we can grow and provide better services to kids. But with that said, and despite that, there's no way we can ever replace in-person learning for our kiddos. So we're going to continue to focus on making that happen to the greatest extent possible. And the next slide is just, here's how to reach Michelle and myself. So if you have any questions, if you want to hear anything specific about special education, if you have questions about your own child and how they're accessing their education, whether it be through an IEP or just through the remote or hybrid circumstances, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask your questions and let us know. Let us know what we're doing well and what areas you have some concerns with that maybe we need to take a closer look at. Are there any questions for Michelle or I? As a special educator, I've learned to provide great wait time. So I'm here for a while, so. Thank you, everybody.
I think we're doing great. Thank you very much. It's always good to hear from you guys and hear the numbers and everything. It's interesting with, I mean, this is such a big deal with all the COVID and wondering how all of it's going with the special needs folks. And, you know, sometimes it makes it easier. Sometimes it makes it hard. It's really nice to hear that many people showed up at the meeting because I know that sometimes that does make it harder to leave home and everything to actually be in person at a meeting. So that's actually great feedback for you guys.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So good deal. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to, again, back with Michelle Ney on having her follow up with the Community Family Partnership update.
All right, thank you so much. Awesome, thanks for bringing up the first slide. And so some of you may know that in 2013, Senate Bill 193 put the role of family school community partnering liaison to the state in every school district. So it's not a position, but it's a role that different people wearing different hats assume in every school district, and then coordinate with or really get information from the director of Family School Community Partnering, Dr. Darcy Hutchins, at the Colorado Department of Education. So this definition is from, and a lot of this information is directly from the Colorado Department of Education. And those of you who've been on DAAC before will be familiar with some of these slides and the standards. So really the definition is the collaboration of families, schools, and communities as active partners in improving learner, classroom, school, district, and state outcomes. And the key word here is active partners. And so when you think about active partnerships and really making them invitational, we are challenged to add an additional lens to that this year, and that's the lens of COVID. We look through many lenses in education, and this year we've got a new one to look through, and we talked a little bit about that before now. But if you could please move on to the next slide. So thinking about the things that impact education and a student's experience. And we have, this looks very much like a Venn diagram, but really it's a dynamic model. And so as these forces change, the areas of overlap will change as well. And so just take a moment to look at all the different forces that come into play here. And I can see that pandemic is not listed, so maybe this slide needs to be updated. All right, you can move on to the next slide, please. So the Family School Community Partnering standards are taken from the National PTA standards on family partnerships. And as we look through these standards, think again about how we may want to look at things differently with what we're dealing with COVID now. Lewis Palmer School District has always done an amazing job with all of these standards. And so I would invite you all to think about and then share back with me what some of the things are that we're doing differently now because of COVID. So the first standard is welcoming all families into the school community. And thinking again about being invitational and active in that partnering. Just think about how we might be doing that differently. You can go on to the next slide. Communicating effectively, I can think of a number of examples of how we're doing things even more intensively this year. I think about maybe the thought exchanges that were done over the summer, all of the communications that are going out on very, very regular basis to keep people informed. And so those are just some examples that I'm thinking of looking at these slides again. Supporting student success, certainly. We are engaged in lots of different ways, looking at different means of supporting students and meeting their needs, all of them. All right, and the next slide. Speaking up for every child, and again, CDEAC, for instance, would be an example of that. And I'm sure you all can, even district accountability as well. That would be a great example of that too. All right, and the next slide would be sharing power. And so when we think about even going back to the thought exchanges that I just brought up that we did this summer, and allowing people to have a voice and being part of the decisions that were needing to be made at that time and continue to need to be made on an ongoing basis, given the ever-changing landscape of education at this time. All right, and the next slide, please. And collaborating with the community. We certainly are seeing evidence of that in new ways with COVID. And I really would invite you, and I'll talk about this in just a moment about the promising practices. I really would invite you all to think about ways that we are demonstrating partnerships with taking into account all of these standards. And specifically, they don't have to address every single one, but if there's an example of one particular standard that could be highlighted with something that you all are doing or seeing in your individual buildings, that would be a great submission for the promising practices, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So if you could go on to the next slide, please. So here we are with the CDE Resources, and I'd just like to highlight a couple of these things. One of them is the promising practices, and part of, and I think you all will get or have these, have this PowerPoint. And so if you can then look at these resources, one of the things that I really wanted to highlight is the promising practices. And so Darcy Hutchins, the Director of Family School Community Partnering at CDE, solicits submissions and does a call for submissions for promising practices across the state. And then those are gathered and compiled. And you can see examples of those. Usually there is a big kickoff of Family School Community Partnering Month, which is the month of October every year, where these promising practices are highlighted. But because we weren't able to meet in person this year, she actually did videos with some of the, almost all of the individual submissions. And those videos are on that second that second resource that's listed here. If you click on that, then you can see those videos, the interviews talking about the promising practices. And then as a resource, the next resource there is all of the promising practices that have been collected throughout the years. Lewis Palmer School District is included in a number of those years, but they're also, so they're highlighted by standard and by essential element, but then also by year. So you can go through and look at examples. And I would just ask that if you can think of anything, it would really be wonderful to have more submissions from Lewis Palmer School District. And so please reach out to me. And it's a very, very simple process. And it's not daunting at all. I know it sounds like another thing to add to your plate at this time, but it really is very quick and easy. And it's a wonderful way to add to this growing collection of promising practices for engagement. And then the last slide are some national resources. As always, if you're interested in having any follow-up discussions, if you have any questions that you'd like to discuss more in depth, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via telephone or email, and I would be happy to discuss any of these things more in detail. Does anybody have any questions for me right now? I'm looking in the chat. Hold on, let me pull that up. So the national standards are the PTA, the national PTA standards for family partnering or family engagement. And then the promising practices are something that Dr. Darcy Hutchins has put together. And so that's an initiative that she has done there. And they're promising practices in a number of different departments and organizations, but she has collected promising practices for family, school, community partnering. And those are what are listed on the website. Does that answer the question? Okay, great.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Michelle? This is a wonderful, wonderful liaison for the district and the families and the students to be part of it. I think Michelle brings, with this group, brings the district advisory committee that helps those that come to the advisory committee really understand a different breadth of what's going on in the students that we see, because oftentimes we get involved with our own students. We forget other students that are out there, and there's multitudes of students out there. You know, we're locked into the baseball, we're locked into, you know, the writing students or the performing students or something like that. And so sometimes it's really good to, these talks that we have sometimes are really good to realize there's so much more out there. So these are the things that DAAC is really good at trying to hopefully have you guys take back to your committees at the school and try and disseminate out to the rest of your schools so that they understand what is really going on in the district, in addition to everything else that's happening. And we always want to try and make that available to people, but it's kind of mind-numbing when you stop and think about it. Most people don't really realize everything that is really happening in the district. And of course, COVID kind of interrupted that this year. We were really hoping we would have informational booths and things like that for all these groups and information things available for folks so that they could really find out what's available out there, and if they have that passion to get involved. And of course, COVID took that away. So hopefully this will help you be able to talk smarter and think smarter about the district as you speak with your cohorts at school. Okay. Did anybody come up with any other things for discussion tonight that is burning a hole in their heart or anything like that? hopefully we've got, Thanksgiving week coming up here, and we'll all have a week-long break from all these things that are happening. And hopefully everybody will be able to enjoy a time, at least with the immediate family, and stay healthy and that kind of a thing. And we'll be able to enjoy that as we head into finals. I see we have new final schedules coming down the pipeline and everything that we get to try to commit to memory now. So I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and impending holidays. I don't see anything coming in for discussions. Our next meeting is in December. Just gonna get my schedule back up here. Oops, no, I'm sorry, not December. Our next meeting is going to be January 12th from 7 to 8:30. And we'll be hearing our virtual tour with Lewis Palmer Elementary School, talking about campus, their campus, and then talking about safety and security update with Dennis Coates, and the mid-year budget review with Shanna Steele. So that should be full of interesting stuff. Dennis is always really good to listen to as far as the safety and security, because he's really pressed some good safety for our district since he's taken that over. And so that's always a good thing to be a part of. So make sure that's on your schedule. And with that, any additional information? Dr. Benton, do you have anything to add?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
No, I think I just wanted to say thanks to Terry and Michelle and Rick for giving of their time. I think it's always so impressive to hear all of the work going around the district that a lot of folks never get to hear about. So I appreciate them giving of their time. I think you can see what incredible people we have and how devoted they are. And the other thing I would just say is that you hear the heart for our kids in every single presentation. And I think that's probably the piece that when Holly asked what makes Palmer Ridge unique, I would say what makes all of our schools unique is the fact that we truly do care about every kid. So I just wanted to say thank you to them.
That's very true. Every school that we have in our district is so unique and has a special place for each child, which I think they're not all cookie cutter schools, which is really, really neat. That's something we noticed from the very get-go that we came here. So I was really pleased with this district. So I think that's something to be very, very proud of. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Thank you, Holly. Second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. And with that, everybody can type in aye, and we will commence until January. Have a wonderful holiday season, everybody.